Many thanks to Chris Bedford. Any thoughts? Anything you'd like to leave us off with, sir? Am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, how about that summer, huh? Got pretty hot pretty quick.
I heard Michael Avenatti is joining Trump's legal team. Is that true?
I've no
Started
idea.
on Twitter right now.
All right. All that and more tomorrow on Outnumbered. We're live every day at noon. Now here's Melissa Francis in for Harris Faulkner.
Fox News alert: President Trump goes on the offensive after one of his newest legal advisors drops a bombshell. This is Outnumbered Overtime, and I'm Melissa Francis in today for Harris Faulkner. Reaction from the president after Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani dropped that stunner on Hannity, saying the president had reimbursed his personal attorney Michael Cohen for the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels, but that President Trump did not know the details. The president tweeting, "Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered into through reimbursement a private contract between two parties known as a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. These agreements are very common among celebrities and people of wealth." This morning, Giuliani pushing back against claims that he had contradicted the president, who said last month that he did not know about the payment Cohen had made to the porn star ahead of the 2016 election. Watch.
I don't think there's any contradiction of that. That's what I said last night. People were indeed surprised, which is why I think this is a tweet that's very valuable, because the president indicates he understood it. He didn't know the details of this until we knew the details of it, which is a couple weeks ago. If we had to defend this as not being a campaign contribution, I think we could do that. This was for personal reasons.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us from the North Lawn. A lot of news today. Break it down, John.
Gee, what a difference compared to a regular day, huh, Melissa?
Right.
There's usually nothing happening here. You know, there are a lot of people who say that what Rudy Giuliani dropped last night on Sean Hannity's show is a direct contradiction of what the president told the White House press pool aboard Air Force One when he said he had absolutely no knowledge that Michael Cohen paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels for that non-disclosure agreement. But Giuliani, as you're pointing out, saying, well, no, this was an arrangement that the president had with Michael Cohen, that he was paying him a retainer for services rendered and expenses incurred, but he just didn't bother to ask Michael Cohen what the expenses are about. Now, while you could probably argue that in a court of law, it certainly stands in contradiction with what Michael Cohen said when the revelation of the payment to Stormy Daniels first went public back on February 13th, when Cohen said neither the Trump organization nor the Trump campaign was a party to the transaction with Ms. Clifford, and neither reimbursed me for the payment either directly or indirectly. We have not heard from Michael Cohen today his explanation of his side of the story, but certainly the former mayor, Rudy Giuliani, insisting Cohen did get the money from the president. Listen here.
He was definitely reimbursed. There's no doubt about it.
So why did he say he wasn't?
Maybe. First of all, if we had to defend this as not being a campaign contribution, I think we could do that. This was for personal reasons. This was the president had been hurt personally, not politically, personally so much, and the First Lady by some of the false allegations. That one more false allegation, 6 years old. I think he was trying to help the family.
After his statement to Sean Hannity last night, I had a midnight conversation with Rudy Giuliani in which he walked me through the thinking behind this whole thing. And he told me that, well, this is likely going to be embarrassing that the president kept this retainer fund from Michael Cohen going. What it does is it speaks to the very heart of the case that Giuliani and the president's legal team believe that the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York is building against Cohen, and that is that he might have been involved in some sort of illegal campaign contribution. Giuliani said this morning it certainly was not that. Listen here.
It was only a bombshell in the sense that it blew up their case. I mean, this whole case began as a illegal campaign contribution. $130,000 must have been campaign funds. They go after, they invade Cohen's office as a lawyer. Disgraceful. I do not know how they could put their signatures on that affidavit, but they do.
One possible sticking point here, though, is in order to make that payment of $130,000, Michael Cohen had to take out a loan, draw on his home equity line of credit for then, which the mayor says that the president paid him back. So that might get into a little bit of a gray area legally. One thing interesting to point out, Melissa, is that this whole thing was cooked up between Giuliani, the president, and his other outside legal counsel, Jay Sekulow, last night. No one here at the White House knew that it was going to happen, and everybody was absolutely floored when those words came out of Rudy Giuliani's mouth last night. Melissa?
There you go. All right, John Roberts, lots to talk about. For more on this, we are joined by our first guest, Robert Driscoll. He served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Does this take the Stormy Daniels matter off the table?
I don't think it does. I mean, it hopefully for the president avoids one problem on the campaign finance side, but it could create some other problems in terms of how the payment was done. There could be a structuring issue or some other legal issue if that turns out to be a loan, because loans have to be reported. There are different problems. I mean, when you try to solve one, you create others.
Yeah, but it's getting so minor. You know, I mean, when this originally came out, people went, oh, so, you know, he's a terrible husband. That's shocking news. So the other side tried to make it about campaign finance. Okay, that seemed legitimate. Now they've answered that. So now it's down to, where, you know, was it reported correctly as a loan? I mean, it's like it kind of gets more and more minor every time they work on it.
No, and I agree. My main point is that the Stormy Daniels case generally, I think, you know, the public has kind of baked in their view of President Trump, that he may have not been the most faithful husband. And I don't think it's going to really affect anyone, because everyone has to remember, he can't be indicted as president. So what he's really worried about is impeachment. And I don't think, you know, his relationship with Stormy Daniels, regardless of the surrounding circumstances, is going to be kind of viewed as an impeachment-worthy offense if there's some technical financial violation. I think, you know, he can power through this problem. I mean, sure, it's embarrassing to have to walk back that statement, but, you know, and it's embarrassing that if this actually happened. But I think he can power through that because the public kind of had accepted that. And if he can, you know, keep his eyes on the prize and get exonerated on the Russia stuff, I think he can weather the storm on this.
I mean, one interesting twist in this was that the outrage before this came out was, of course, he knew about the payment, and of course it was his money, and now he's saying, okay, it was my money, leaving the other side to say, no, it wasn't your money. So they're kind of having to go back on, you know, what they were trying to argue before. Now that he admits it, he sort of takes the bite out of their argument. Isn't that true?
Well, certainly he does, in the sense that as the candidate, he can donate unlimited amounts to his own campaign. So if the payment comes from him versus coming from his attorney, it does weaken the argument that it's a unlawful campaign donation. You know, it does hurt him, because he did seem pretty unequivocal when he denied that he knew anything about it. But certainly from this legal perspective, I think that they were, you know, trying to thwart this possible campaign finance issue, and they did. And I think, as you said before, I think the remaining issues, that there could be some technical legal violations, but I think in the scheme of things, they're relatively minor.
I heard somebody in the last hour call the retainer a slush fund, but that is in fact how retainers work. Is that lawyers, you know, you give them money up front for expenses and things that are going to be incurred along the way, and then later you go back and get accounting of where the money went, unless you're really worried in the meantime and you demand to know along the way. But for the most part, the attorneys don't call you every time they use the money to make Xeroxes or send stuff or file motions. They just work against the money. So that part of it, even though people said word slush fund, that's not actually accurate. This is what a retainer is.
That's generally how retainers work. That's the way it works in my practice.
Yeah.
And certainly expenses are treated the same way. You just take your expenses out of the retainer. You send a statement to the client.
Yeah.
Now, something like a settlement you generally discuss with the client. But again, the president can explain if he had an unusual situation. He could have just, you know, had a sum of money and said, look, go take care of any problems that arise.
Yeah, especially if you're running for president, you're kind of busy with other stuff rather than looking through your monthly bill.
I mean, and there'll be, obviously, people ask the question, what other payments were made and those kind of things, and to who, which is, you know, going to be a little bit tricky. But I think that it's plausible that he had you know, just a monthly take care of issues check he sent to Michael Cohen, and that may be the story he's going with now. The thing that would concern me as his lawyers is he could have done this sooner. You know, he should have kind of gotten straight with his lawyers sooner to allow them to walk this back.
All right. Thank you so much, Robert Driscoll. We appreciate your time. In addition to his revelation about the Stormy Daniels payment, Rudy Giuliani also says James Comey should be prosecuted for leaking. And the former mayor, who was a federal prosecutor, of course, slams the Mueller probe, saying it's desperate to make a case and could be trying to trap the president into perjury. Giuliani also lays out the parameters for a possible interview with the special counsel, saying he would push for it to be just 2 hours long and would want the questions in advance.
We've given them 1.2 million documents. Didn't fight with them over it. They should be able to do this if they have a case in 2.5 hours or they want to dispose of it. The basis of the case is dead. Sessions should step in and close it. I contend the only crimes committed so far in this investigation are the ones they committed, the government committed. Right. Comey leaked in order to get a special prosecutor.
But Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal accusing the president of obstructing justice in plain sight as he calls on his colleagues to stand up to the White House.
I think it will come back to haunt my colleagues in Congress if they fail to stand up and speak up. History will judge them. President Trump is refusing to cooperate in a lawful investigation. He is engaging in obstruction of justice in plain view, unfolding in real time. And I'm hoping that my colleagues in Congress will stand up and speak out.
Republican Congressman Darrell Issa sits on the House Judiciary Committee. Let's address first what Mr. Blumenthal just said before you. I mean, isn't it a constitutional issue that the president has the right to do his job, and that, you know, the obstruction of justice, is it obstruction of justice, or is he using the powers of the president as they've been outlined by our founding fathers?
Well, it may come to that, but to be honest, the malpractice you heard from the senator is to leap to a whole bunch of conclusions that just aren't true. First of all, as Rudy Giuliani said, the president has provided vast amounts of documents, many of them well outside the mandate given for the special prosecutor. Secondly, the reality is, you're right, a president is supposed to conduct the business of government, and with rare exceptions, the tool that the House and the Senate had, the only tool they have, is not prosecution or interrogatories or demanding that they come up, the question of trial or impeachment. In this case, Mueller is asking for things related, for example, to the firing of Comey. And as Rudy Giuliani said accurately, Comey should be prosecuted for his known unlawful leaking of documents, his leaving government with documents, the same as Hillary Clinton did. These are areas in which Comey should be the target of the special prosecutor if he wants to deviate from his original mandate. But I think here's the point that Senator Blumenthal didn't hit that I will hit. Interrogatories are the appropriate way to get answers from busy people who are not targets of an investigation, who you don't want to have, quote, take the fifth. So these questions that have been leaked, again, inappropriately leaked by Mueller or somebody around him, these are questions in some cases appropriate to hand to Rudy Giuliani as the president's lawyer, to have the appropriate ones answered, and it would be reasonable for them to answer it. That also minimizes the president's distraction from the North Korean summit and from other duties that we, the American people, elected him to do.
Okay, so that's one of the more brilliant moves that I've heard in the past 24 hours, this idea that he can't even focus on this issue until he's done, solving a nuclear crisis and, basically working on behalf of world peace. When he's done with that, he can come and work on this. And that seems pretty clever, and not only that, it's pretty reasonable. And then in the wake of that, if there is some big agreement on North Korea, it's isn't it hard to then turn back to this? It seems petty.
Well, the fact is you have a special prosecutor who's looking for a crime and hasn't been able to find one in over a year. And I think Rudy Giuliani made that case. Even the president has articulated that time and time again. But if he's going to continue fishing, then as somebody who fished for a living, if you will, as the lead investigator for Congress, there are right ways to do it. You send letters of inquiry, you send interrogatories, you depose lesser people who have more available information, and you go to the top only if appropriate. And by the way, when you go to the top, you'd better darn well have your very tight questions, not these loose ones we saw leaked.
Is there a downside to Giuliani coming out and saying we'll do 2.5 hours like Clinton did, although I think Clinton actually sat for 4 hours, the President Clinton did, and saying, maybe we'll answer these questions in writing and then, not answer some of them? Is there a downside to him talking about these things?
Well, what's interesting is the suit in which former President Clinton was involved had its interrogatories first. He had his objections. He actually went to court and lost on that question of whether or not something outside his presidency could cause him to sit for it. And then he sat for it at a time and place that was convenient not to distract the presidency, which was part of the process when the plaintiff went to court. So all of those things Giuliani is very familiar with. I think the important thing for people to understand is that you have unlimited ability to distract the president if we allow it. What we have to do is ask the question, how many of these questions could be answered by appropriate staff? Your previous commentary had to do with the retainer. A person who's worth $10 or $11 billion who pays somebody a retainer to take care of small problems or distractions and so on in business, can you imagine now, as the man responsible for the safety of the free world, denuclearizing 2 peninsulas? How could we not say, you know what, Mueller, give the questions to staff, let them try to answer as many as are appropriate and give you answers, and come back to us with a tight request for that which only the president could answer. And by the way, why does he ever have to answer in person?
Yeah, there you go. We have to go. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. Congressman Darrell Issa, thank you. More questions for former FBI Director James Comey as Fox News obtains new details on the law professor who shared Comey's sensitive memos with the media. Reaction from Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Plus, we are keeping an eye on new developments out of North Korea. The White House hinting that 3 American prisoners may be moving closer to being released. A live report at Fox News Alert, new details on former FBI Director James Comey's law professor friend, you remember him, who was used as a go-between to leak sensitive memos to the media, documents reviewed by Fox News, shedding new light on Daniel Richman's role as an FBI special government employee. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington with a lot more on this story. Catherine.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and good afternoon. FBI records review by Fox News show Daniel Richman was a special government employee for the FBI for at least 19 months, beginning in June 2015. With a security clearance and badge access to the FBI building here in Washington, the records show Richman answered directly to Director Comey. According to the records, Richman's stated responsibilities include the use of encryption by terror suspects, known as going dark. And in August of 2015, his projects were expanded to include the implications of federal investigations being brought to state and local prosecutors. But government transcripts also indicate Richman was sent talking points about the FBI's handling of the Clinton email investigation and why the case was different from other prosecutions for the mishandling of classified information. When he was a special government employee at the FBI, Richman also gave media interviews defending Comey, but none identify him as an FBI employee. In his Fox interview, Comey was pressed on his Senate testimony last year after he was fired by the president and why Comey did not reveal Richman's FBI status.
You call him a good friend and a professor, but you didn't reveal that you had hired him as a special government employee for the FBI to work on special projects. Why?
Because it wasn't relevant.
Did the Inspector General interview you about your handling of the memos?
Sure, yeah. Has already. And I expect a report from them, not on the handling of classified information, because that's frivolous, but on, did I comply with policy? Did I comply with my employment agreement?
As you just heard there, the Comey memos are now the subject of an Inspector General review over the handling of classified information. Richman did not respond to Fox's questions, including whether he told media outlets about his special FBI status when he gave them comments about Comey's handling of the FBI's Clinton email investigation, The FBI took our questions, but so far has not commented or offered any statement on Richman's status, Melissa.
Catherine Herridge, great reporting as always. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For more on this, let's bring in Tom Fitton. He is president of the conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch. So what do you make of this latest wrinkle?
Well, it's further evidence of FBI corruption under James Comey's 10 years FBI director. He hired a buddy to do this work. He was out there talking about FBI matters without disclosing it, and then Comey comes in, testifies, and leaves out a material fact, a fact that people would have wanted to know when it came to evaluating his decision about leaking this information through Mr. Richmond. You know, and if there's going to be a credible leak investigation, it has to be more than just about this leak of the memo through Richmond to the New York Times, which was illicit, inappropriate, and led to the creation of Mueller investigation, calling that whole thing into account. Because you can bet that given Richmond's role at the FBI and Mueller's close relationship, that this wasn't the first time leaks like this occurred. And I think that's the open question.
Okay.
Why did he decide to use Richmond at this point? Did it just come up with the idea out of the blue? I don't believe it. I believe there were prior leaks, and it needs to be investigated.
Okay, but looking at this one in particular, if Richmond was out in the media and he was portraying himself as a professor, as an expert in the area, and here in fact he had been sent talking points in order to defend his friend and the person he was working for, even though it was unpaid, he had a clearance, he had a badge. I mean, he was working for them, and he's out giving talking points, defending them. Is there anything illegal about that, or is it, I mean, how does it rise to the level of corruption? It's sleazy, but beyond that, what do you make of it?
Well, it shows you that the FBI is as a political an organization as any other government bureaucracy. They have press operations, and they try to defend themselves in the media. I think Richmond had an obligation to disclose the paid relationship he had with the agency, or the employment relationship he had with the agency. I'm not sure whether he was paid or not.
I don't think he was, yeah.
But either way, it's something that he should have at least talked about. But, you know, the problem for Professor Richmond is because of what Comey asked him to do, and which he did, was taking these government documents and giving them to the New York Times. And the open question is whether Richmond had inappropriate access to classified information as a result of Comey transferring some of those memos to him and his other lawyers.
We will see. Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, thank you.
You're welcome.
President Trump hinting that North Korea could be planning to release 3 American captives in the near future. All the details on that and the impact it could have on the planned summit between President Trump and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. A former senior State Department official is here to weigh in. Fox News alert potential new developments on the Korean Peninsula. President Trump hinting that there may soon be an update on 3 Americans being held captive in North Korea. President Trump tweeting last night, quote, "As everybody is aware, the past administration has long been asking for 3 hostages to be released from a North Korean labor camp, but to no avail. Stay tuned." White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders reacting to the possibility earlier today.
Certainly that would be an incredible step and certainly a sign of goodwill moving into the summit, moving into these discussions with North Korea.
All this as the president's national security team met yesterday afternoon to discuss the planned summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Greg Palkap is live in London with all the details. Greg.
Hi, Melissa. There is a flurry of talk, at least, about the possible release of 3 American citizens who have been held for the last several months in North Korea. The 3 are Kim Dong-chul, he's a businessman who was detained in 2015, and Kim Hak-sung and Kim Sang-duk, or Tony Kim. They worked and taught at a Christian charity-backed university in Pyongyang, and they were arrested in 2017. Reports in the last few days had claimed that the detainees who had been accused by the regime of anti-government activity have been moved from a labor camp to a hotel on the outskirts of the North Korean capital. We got no hard confirmation of that, Melissa, but earlier today on Fox News, the former New York mayor and current member of President Trump's legal team, Rudy Giuliani, went a little bit further. Take a listen.
This is the President of the United States. He's getting ready to negotiate probably one of our most historic agreements since the opening to China.
And Nick's another with Iran, perhaps.
Yeah, and we got Kim Jong-un impressed enough to be releasing 3 prisoners today.
Now, in fact, those 3 are still in detention in North Korea, according to a senior administration official who later spoke with Fox News. In their words, some work still needs to be done to gain their release. In their words, Mr. Giuliani just got a little bit ahead of events. All this happens, of course, following last week's summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in along the DMZ, which we reported on, and ahead, of course, of the planned summit, the big one, between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. That, Melissa, is said to be happening at the end of this month or maybe early June. Analysts say that any release of these Americans prior to that would be a very strong confidence-building measure. We will see. Back to you.
All right, Greg Palcott, thank you. Joining me now for more on all of this is Christian Whiten. He is a former senior advisor in the Donald Trump and George W. Bush administrations. He also worked with Ambassador John Bolton on North Korea during Bolton's time at the UN, so you are very familiar with this matter and the ins and outs. I mean, one thing that struck me immediately is, what if they release any of these men and they resemble the condition of Otto Warmbier? Wouldn't that would be a problem at this point, wouldn't it?
That would be. Hopefully that's not the case. The indications are, I mean, there's some speculation that they've been moved from a very tough prison camp to something more amenable like a hotel so that they can recover somewhat. And the indications are, at least there is no indication that they've been tortured to the degree that Otto was, where he was brought to within an inch of his life and then ultimately died back in the United States. But that would certainly put a cloud over what's going on.
Yeah. What does it tell you otherwise, that there's a move to release these three, potentially?
Otherwise, it's a good sign. The North Koreans know this is important to us. Vice President Mike Pence has been strong on North Korean human rights issues and sent a very strong message. It's North Korean Freedom Week when people in South Korea and the United States try to put attention onto the Stalinist regime and its human rights abuses. But this fits a pattern of North Korea making concessions actually in advance of real negotiations of the summit with President Trump. You had them stop their ballistic missile and nuclear testing, say they would stop that. They closed their nuclear test facility and have taken other steps that seem to imply they are serious, and we can never really trust them, but the initial signs are good.
It does remind you of the concern that has been in the background. I mean, obviously at the forefront is the nuclear threat, and now that seems to be being dealt with, a lot of attention is turning to the plight of the North Korean people in that country, and it's symbolized by the idea that they do have these terrible labor prison camps for people who haven't committed crimes. You know, as the focus shifts to that, is there an idea that President Trump can do something about that, or are we getting way ahead of ourselves?
Getting a little ahead, the most important thing is to deal with the threat to the United States, which is the ballistic missile threat, the fact that North Korea could potentially put a hydrogen bomb on an ICBM and reach us. So that's the most important thing. But the United States can and should always stand for freedom. We should encourage those who want to change the world for the better, and in doing so would make it safer. You know, we've reached arms control agreements with bad people in the past. With the Soviet Union, Reagan reached the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement that eliminated an entire class of weapons. That was after some tough negotiating. He had to walk away from the table in Reykjavik only to get the deal later. But that was never a deal that we would keep shut about what the Soviet Union was doing to its people. Reagan continued to do that throughout his presidency, and then by 1991, the Soviet Union was gone. So we can do things. Our power isn't infinite, but it's considerable.
You know, with Otto Warmbier, lots of people knew the story about him, you know, maybe taking a sign, you know, and the idea that he lost his life for that. With these three Korean Americans, did they do anything? I mean, what do we know about this?
The details are fuzzy, but with 99% probability, we can assume they did nothing in the sense that these would not be crimes in the United States, nor would they even be punished to anywhere near the degree they are, even in other police states. If you did this in China, if you did this in Russia today, would you face this type of fate? No. North Korea is a Stalinist state, and these people are being used for leverage. It's one thing, of course, to take Americans of single citizenship and put them in prison like Otto. These are Korean Americans. I believe they hold passports for both the United States and the Republic of Korea. So this is North Korea sort of testing us, testing the limits of that citizenship. And I think it's very good that we treat them just like any other American, which of course they are, and we make it clear that we want our people back.
Yeah. Christian Whiten, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Jamie.
A growing showdown at our southern border over that caravan of migrants trying to cross into the country from Mexico. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announcing he's moving more prosecutors and judges to the border. Is this the right response? We're going to talk to an immigration attorney who's also a former federal prosecutor.
We're sending a message worldwide don't come illegally. Make your claim to enter America in the lawful way and wait your turn.
Jeff Sessions says he's beefing up legal resources at the southern border, sending 35 attorneys and nearly 20 judges to help deal with a caravan of migrants trying to cross into the U.S. from Mexico. As we get new video from Tijuana, Mexico, of dozens of migrants entering a processing area waiting to present their cases for asylum in the U.S. Here's Sessions.
We are not going to let this country be overwhelmed. People are not going to caravan or otherwise stampede our border. We need legality and integrity in the system. People should wait their turn, ask to apply lawfully before they enter our country. So we're sending a message worldwide: don't come illegally.
Let's bring in Michael Wilds. He's an immigration attorney and a former federal prosecutor. So you see this from both sides.
Sure do, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
What do you think of this move?
I think the Attorney General has to take a chill pill. He's ordering a process that's effective and orderly. This is an effective, orderly process. The 11 people that absconded and tried to sneak in broke our laws and should be treated as people who broke our immigration laws, and they'll be given just treatment. The individuals that are waiting online because they see America as a safe haven, we can't be saying to the world, people who are in jeopardy, that, wait, you got to get in the back of the line, apply at the American Embassy. Our political asylum laws were written during the Cold Era time. The fact that gangs have taken over historically has not been a predicate to get political asylum. The real question is, ultimately, is our geopolitics in sync with our immigration laws, and should America be opening its doors at this point to these individuals, give them a credible, fair hearing, and if they have a justiciable case, then let them go through the system.
When you look at those pictures, these are not people who have time for an intellectual argument that you're suggesting. I mean, he's sending more judges down there. He's sending more people down there to try and figure out who has the right to come in. As we look at video of hundreds of people sitting on top of a wall, it seems like he's doing the right thing, sending resources down there. Why would you tell him to take a chill pill? That seems outrageous.
I think the way he is coining this, that people should go to the back of the line and they shouldn't be gathering at our borders, is outrageous. The truth is, sending resource down to the southern border to adjudicate and give due process to credible fears and people is the right thing to do. That's a good thing. No, absolutely. But they should have their day in court. But let's talk about the day in court. They have a credible fear interview. The 1996, imagine this, the 1996 Act says they can have an expedited hearing within 45 days, or if they don't want work authorization, within the next 3 years. America has these extraordinary hinged open doors. We've always been there to huddled masses and to people that are in jeopardy. There's a new normal in the southern part of our country border, and that is this gang warfare needs to catch up to the jurisprudence in asylum law.
But these people come up in a caravan, and you saw there were people already waiting at the border to come in, and these people shoved ahead of them. I mean, they literally shoved to the front of the line at that border. How is that fair to the people that were already waiting there when these people are being ushered here by a political group with a megaphone trying to make a point?
Let's talk about the merits of why they're coming here. We had a case, and a lawyer in our office
I think a lot of people, the merits of why they're coming here is something that needs to be heard in court.
I agree.
I don't think anybody argues if you are truly in jeopardy, we want to open our country to you. But that's not what all of those things look like. And as you're coming with a group that's called Nations Without Borders, or whatever it is, without borders, you know, that's something, they're making a political point as opposed to trying to help people.
I appreciate your comments and the spirit of how it looks. But the dialogue on immigration has deteriorated, and unfortunately the media, and particularly this network, has a lot to do with that. Yes,
it's our fault.
No, it's not contributing to the amelioration of the problem. The truth is, you're right. We should be looking at the merits.
How do you see that when we're trying to have a discussion about what's going on in the border?
Let me raise my point. There was a lawyer, as I started to say before, in my office, whose relative, a father, was shot in the back. When the child came here because he was in fear, the judge said, well, the fear is over, you have to go back.
There are a million stories like that. And I'm sorry, you're taking too long to make your point. It's a TV segment. I hear what you're saying. Everybody's got a story like that.
And
everybody's waiting in line.
I agree.
Absolutely. But these people don't get to shove to the front
but they're not
of all the
passing
other people who need it. And to blame our network for that is outrageous.
Not really.
Yes,
not really.
We're having a candid conversation where others are just doing pictures and being emotional about it. We're trying to talk about the real facts behind it, sir.
I agree. And when they get online, they're waiting online. If they're going in front of somebody else, that's not right. But they still should have the same day in court, correct?
Absolutely. And that's why sending more legal resources down there makes a lot of sense.
It does if they're going to give them a fair day in court. And if an attorney general says...
What makes you think they're going to be unfair?
Because the attorney general... Because our chief lawyer for this nation is telling people that this is not appreciated. Why shouldn't they come to our border?
It's not appreciated when you caravan people up to climb over a fence because it's breaking the law. They're breaking the law.
Climbing over the fence is breaking the law.
Yes,
Coming into the courts is a right that you have.
Absolutely. We agree on that. So it's a great place to end. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
One of the president's most recent legal hires making a splash, going after the special counsel, James Comey, and revealing President Trump reimbursing his attorney for a secret payment to Stormy Daniels. So does that signal a shift in Trump team's legal strategy?
And I'm Dana Perino. Big day of news in our nation's capital as we await the White House briefing set to start during our show. How will Sarah Sanders address Rudy Giuliani's comments on Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, and Bob Mueller? Will the American hostages held in North Korea be released? And is the Democrats' frequently touted fundraising edge overstated? We'll discuss all that and more on the Daily Briefing.
Back to our top story, Rudy Giuliani making big waves just 2 weeks after joining the president's legal team. Last night, he revealed that President Trump reimbursed his personal attorney for the money paid out to Stormy Daniels. Giuliani also slammed the Mueller probe and said James Comey should be prosecuted. Earlier today, Giuliani hinted at a more combative legal strategy.
The president was quite pleased that we're making progress. We're moving along.
Much more aggressive than had been.
Yeah, well, it's not going to get any less aggressive.
Time now for our power panel. Progressive commentator David Bernstein is the CEO and founder of Run for America. Guy Benson is political editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. He is also the co-host of Fox's new radio show, Benson and Harf, which premieres on Monday. I cannot wait.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll let you go first since you've got the new show. What do you think of these latest developments? Yes, exactly.
Well,
whoa.
Which ones? I mean, it's all coming at us very quickly. On the Rudy stuff, it seems to me like Giuliani's joined the legal team. Cobb is out. He's in. They're pursuing this more aggressive strategy. And on the Stormy Daniels related side of all of this, Rudy's decided that they need a new story that is all on the same page that reflects at least the information that the feds might have. Because we've heard, it feels like 6 or 7 rounds of different stories on this.
Right.
So Rudy's come out and said it was private between 2 people. Trump didn't know what he was paying for, but yes, he did reimburse Michael Cohen. Cohen had said the opposite in the past. The White House had said they had no knowledge of any of this.
Right.
Now that's changing. This may end up being exculpatory. This may get Trump and or Cohen out of legal hot water if this is true. But I think it's fair for people to wonder, is it true? Because we keep hearing changes in this
But
tale.
ironically, this is what the other side was screaming all along, was yes, it was Trump's money, and he was paid as his lawyer to make this thing go away and try and keep it from embarrassing him in the campaign. So now they're essentially saying, yep, that's it. So to now call the president and his team a liar for basically confirming what the other side has been saying all along seems like that's not a winning strategy.
Well, you know, it is complicated when you go back and forth and you tell different stories, because then, you know, if you want to choose, this is kind of like a choose your own ending adventure story here that we're all living in the middle of. And if you look at, you know, the problem here, yes, this might get off on the campaign finance violation issue, right? Because if Trump paid the money back, then it's not a campaign finance violation.
Right.
But we don't know that there isn't another statute or something else that's been violated here in the process of doing this, because the idea of the money change, this amount of money.
So now I got to search for a new crime. They got to search for a new crime.
The thing is, so I watched Rudy's interview pretty closely this morning on Fox and Friends, and I understand where he's coming from. He's trying to get his arms around this thing. What they are still claiming, though, is that the issues are completely separate. The payoff and the reimbursement and the campaign had nothing to do with each other. But even Rudy himself, during the interview this morning, said, oh, but imagine if this information had come out from Stormy Daniels in October of the election year, which is at least placing it back into that electoral context. So, again...
But wait, but that makes no difference, because a candidate is allowed to contribute anything he wants to his campaign without limit. So even if, as part of the campaign, the president paid this money to her, he didn't do anything wrong. It's just embarrassing. It's not illegal. It's not campaign finance.
If that is the case, they shouldn't claim it had nothing to do with the campaign. They should just say it did.
Either way, but it doesn't matter. It's just, I mean, it doesn't matter in this
they should tell us the
public
truth.
opinion.
Well,
but legally,
we also don't know that he actually did reimburse the money. We just know that he's now claiming that he did.
That's what the other side's been arguing all along, though. So you can't say now you're changing the argument.
If he did reimburse the money, it would be better. But we don't know that he has. When people stop telling the truth, it's hard to know when they actually tell the truth that they are telling the truth.
And by the way, on public opinion, most people actually don't care about this story.
Right.
That's been polled. The president's approval rating is up. I understand this. You know, we were told by Democrats for a long time, sex and lying about sex doesn't matter. I still think lying shouldn't happen by politicians, and we should call it out when we see it, no matter who does it.
Well, then we would run out of breath. Because it seems like
politicians are lying.
Politicians are
We'd be out of business.
Are lying all the time. I mean, so from here, do you think that the focus changes back to the Mueller probe, maybe where it belongs, versus on the Stormy Daniels?
Well, I think it does, and I think there's another important legal development which people haven't been focusing on, which is the hiring of Emmett Flood, that the president just hired to his legal team, who is, people have been talking all the time, why can't the president get one of these top flight lawyers? He's the best that there is to get.
He's
I
very
think
good.
that's going to be, the relationship between him and Rudy is going to be very interesting.
Great point. We'll end on that one. Thank you. Be sure to catch Guy Benson and Marie Harf when Benson and Harf launches on Fox News Radio on Monday, May 7th. From 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. That's next Monday, 6 p.m. Fox News Radio. I know I won't miss it. All right, we are awaiting the White House press briefing where Press Secretary Sarah Sanders will likely be asked more details about Rudy Giuliani's comments about those payments to Michael Cohen. We will bring that to you live when it happens.